I think I've finally reached the tipping point in my marriage. My wife and I have been together almost 20 years. Our bedroom has been on a slow but gradual decline for the last 15 years. We sat down and had the talk a few months ago, where we hashed out the details of trying to rekindle the spark we once had. One of the main things we both agree upon were the need for date nights as well as other things. Things seem to improving, albeit it only marginally. Again, I'm the one initiating things and 90% of time I get shot down. The usual excuses followed. I doubt too tired, not in the mood. Child is awake, he's 18 years old and off doing his own thing, not feeling very well, headache, aches and pains etc. And my personal favorite. We can't, as you've got to be up for work early in the morning. Anyhow, we persisted with the date nights. Out of 9 that I organized over the last 2 months, my wife cancelled 7 of them, often without notice. Some even planned weeks in advance when she'd breeze in after her work shift and announced she was going out with her friends. When I mentioned our date night we'd had planned, she claimed she'd simply forgotten, despite it being marked on the calendar on the fridge. Again, her idea. So on to this weekend. I've spent the last 2 weeks setting up a date night, so picture this: a whole weekend away, a suite in a 5-star hotel, dinner at a fancy Michelin star restaurant, tickets to the theater, something she's always wanted to do, even shopping for some fancy clothes. So I pick her up after work. I've packed some casual clothes for us both, toiletries etc. I tell her I've got a surprise plan for her, and she immediately starts protesting, saying she has things to do. At this point I'd already checked the calendar and checked with her friends that they didn't have plans for the weekend. I've told her that everything had been taken of and she didn't have to worry. She raised the issue of clothing, but I informed her that I'd got it covered. She seemed to calm down at this point and off we set, although the atmosphere in the car was cold to say the least. Anyway, a few hours later we arrive at the hotel and check in. She seems to cheer up when she sees the suite we have. Her focus returns to me when she asks what I have planned, so I gave her a brief rundown, like shopping, sightseeing, dinner and a show. So we have a light lunch in the hotel restaurant, and head out to do some sightseeing. Saturday we headed out shopping ahead of our planned evening. Several hours later we returned to the hotel to get ready for dinner. After a while she emerges from the bathroom. I can't put into words how amazing she looked, wearing a dark blue evening gown, matching lingerie, 4-inch heels, jewelry, hair and makeup done perfectly. Let's just say my jaw was on the floor. When she saw me staring, she smiled at me and gave me a twirl, and she looked as stunning as the day we tied the knot. So the dinner went as well as it could, although there was very little conversation between us. We hailed a taxi and headed out to the theater. At least I got a thanks for this part. I'd also arranged for a pair of mutual friends to join us at the theater. They'd managed to secure us our tickets. So we take our seats, and being enjoying the show, just as the intermission starts I reach over and place my hand over hers to ask her if she likes the show so far. To my surprise she snatches her hand away from mine like she'd just been bitten by a poisonous snake. She looks me square in the eyes and proceeds to tell me that whatever I was thinking was going to happen tonight when we got back to hotel, I could forget it. Her words almost dripping with disdain and venom, also loud enough so several people around us heard. Our friends didn't know where to look or what to say. My wife told me to shift because she needed to use the bathroom. At this point something inside me just snapped, and I got up, apologized to our friends, informing them I was leaving and I hope they enjoy the rest of the show. I'd received a text message from my friends just as I got back to our hotel room, informing me they told my wife that I'd left and that she just shrugged her shoulders. Still seething with mounting anger, I decided I was heading home, so I packed my clothes and caught a taxi to the nearest train station and managed to get the last train home. I left a note for my wife along with the car keys so she could get herself home. From the moment I received the text from my friend to the time I got home, I didn't receive a single text message or phone call from my wife to inquire if I was okay, or even where I was. This morning I made the decision to relocate to the guest room. I noticed I needed some new bedroom furniture, so I headed down to IKEA. Not my best decision, especially being a Sunday morning. I've given up building flat packs for the day. My wife, however, has asked what the new furniture, but I think she realized when she noticed my clothes and other personal items weren't in the master bedroom. She didn't say anything to me until about an hour ago when she asked me why I was being so childish. I politely explained the previous cancelled date nights in favor of her friends and her, in my opinion, completely unnecessary outburst at me during the intermission at the theater. She just shrugged her shoulders again and asked if intimacy was all I was interested in. I brought up the issue of her attitude when I picked her up from work Friday afternoon with the intent of surprising her. She told me to deal with it. I'm currently sat on my rear deck typing this on my laptop while sipping a large glass of JD, debating on my next steps, the anger still bubbling inside me. Comments. Sometimes it takes a lawyer to make things right. Yeah, sorry to say, some things just can't be fixed. I'm in a similar boat, and I realized I spent years banging my head against a wall that was never ever going to come down in the first place. Comment. My guy, this relationship is dead. She does not respect you, and is completely checked out. Sounds like your kid is pretty much grown. It's time to end things and move on. Have some dignity, and don't let anyone, let alone your wife who is supposed to love you, treat you that way. Call a lawyer ASAP. Comment. The title drew me in, but after reading your post and your comments, boy, I didn't know it hurt reading, and I'm almost tearing up. Firstly, I'm sorry that you were completely disrespected at the theater, and your wife has failed to address or apologize for her horrible treatment. You definitely didn't deserve it. You sound like a husband that was trying to make your wife feel wanted, appreciated and special. You doted on her like she was a queen. I'm also sorry that your wife has not made any effort to help reignite your relationship or prioritize it like you have. Her ignoring and choosing other plans over you is unacceptable. I think I'm advocating for your happiness. It's not to stay in your current situation. I'm not sure if your son who is 18 is still in high school or already graduated. But I think it's time to call quits. Like others have said, women would have loved to have experienced what you gave your wife. She's unappreciative of you and has taken you for granted/advantage for far too long. OP, thank you for your reply. My son is halfway through his college course ATM. I'm currently treating her with the same cold attitude that she's been showing me. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe two wrongs don't make a right, but I want her to know how it feels firsthand. I've made plans this weekend to head out fishing with an old friend I haven't seen in a few years. I've got no intention of informing her where I'm going nor who with that I'll leave Friday afternoon before she finishes work. I don't know whether she's expecting or simply assuming I'll pick her up from work. The area where we fish had no mobile phone coverage, so for the most part I'll be unreachable. My son has an emergency contact for me if needed. Comment. I don't know what's going on with her, if it's a medical issue or not. Maybe or maybe not, but what she did was cruel, point blank period. Why are you handling the situation passively? You are waiting for her to talk about it. What if she doesn't? She's not actively trying to fix anything in your marriage. Waiting to get checked at the doctor is not enough. I don't think you mentioned that she has apologized for her behavior or attitude. I feel that the longer it goes not addressed, the likely she thinks it's okay and will do it again. You are not requiring change for her behavior or marriage. I don't know what you expect when you come back from your trip. I want you to recognize your self-respect and self-worth. I will not be treated this way. I deserve a healthy and respectful marriage. Have you looked into divorce attorneys? Or is divorce not on the table? OP, the closest I got to an apology was that she said, okay, I might have overreacted a little. At the minute I'm trying to keep calm, otherwise I'll likely end up doing something that'll come back to bite me on the arse later on down the road. All options are on the table at the minute, so I'm not ruling out divorce. Update 1. Hi, I meant to respond earlier, but I've been tied up with work etc. Well, where do I start? To begin with, my wife's best friend contacted me and asked what had gone on, as apparently my wife, I'll call her Beth, had told her only part of what happened. So I filled her in on all the gory details. To say she was shocked was an understatement. She proceeded to ask me what I planned to do, considering I was planning a trip to Paris for our anniversary later in the year. I stated that the trip wasn't going ahead, because of her actions at the theater. My darling wife still hasn't apologized for her actions/outbursts. She still claims that she may have overreacted slightly. Her exact words. Beth promptly called my wife and put her on speakerphone. Beth then proceeded to tear her a new one and to add insult to injury, so to speak, spilled the beans about the proposed trip to Paris for our anniversary. My wife proceeded to gush, saying that she knew I'd get over it as I couldn't say no to her. Her happy mood disappeared when Beth informed her that I'd cancelled the trip not 10 minutes ago. As for our home life, since she decided I was moving back into master bedroom, I made the decision to relocate her belongings and personal items into the guest room and install the lock on the master bedroom door. She kicked up a bit of stink about it, until I gave her the choice: either she's in the guest room or I am. For as it stands at the minute, I'm not prepared to share a room with her for the foreseeable future. I'm also in the process of separating our finances. My name has been removed from our joint accounts, and limits on our joint credit cards have been reduced to low limit to prevent spending sprees. She's yet to notice any of these. I've called in a favor from a friend and had the house wired for audio and vision, and so far I've not seen any evidence that she's been cheating on me as others here have suggested. Also, I've got hold of her phone and installed the app there just to confirm my initial findings. I've also turned the house upside down in case she has a second phone stashed away. Again, I've found nothing suspicious. I've also spoken to a solicitor concerning a separation and eventual divorce. I've recently renewed my passport, which when it arrived my wife's first reaction was to ask if the trip to Paris was back on. I replied, or rather snapped back at her, that no, it wasn't back on and the possibility of it ever being planned again was virtually zero. She then proceeded to ask if that was the case, why did I bother renewing my passport? I replied by stating that I have almost 2 months of holiday time saved up from last year, and this year, so I'm planning on flying out to California to see an old friend. We've arranged for a 2-week stay and then a few days over in Ohio to catch up with another buddy. Her jaw dropped to the floor. She appeared to be trying to say something, but nothing was coming out. Yesterday morning when I got in from work, I found her sitting at the kitchen table along with Beth. By the look on my wife's face, I can only assume that Beth has tore into her again after confirming with our mutual friends who were present at the theater. My wife appeared to have been crying by the look of her eyes and face. Beth stood up, looked at me and said that my wife had something to say to me and that she would give us some privacy. I held up my hand to stop her and asked her to remain as witness to ensuing conversation. I'd already set my mobile phone to record just in case. My wife started to speak, which from the part of the first sentence she was able to get out before I cut her off seemed like a proper apology. I don't know if it was a genuine, sincere apology because, like I said, I cut her off before she could finish. I then reached into my bag and pulled out 2 A4 envelopes and placed them on the table in front of her. I then explained the contents on of the envelopes. The first one contained a rough draft of a separation agreement drawn up by my lawyer, which would likely end in us getting divorced. At hearing my words, she started bawling her eyes out again. Her friend calmed her down and asked her what she thought I'd do, as she mentioned that during our conversation Beth had picked up on my cold demeanor and tone. Beth also suggested that my wife had pushed me too far when she humiliated me in front of our friends after I went to the trouble of organizing everything, which it turns out by my wife's own admission was something she'd wish I surprise her with. After my wife calmed down, I proceeded to explain that the second envelope contained a list of marriage/personal counselors and instructions for her to choose one. She was then given the ultimatum to choose one of the envelopes. I would be leaving Sunday morning to catch my first flight to the US, and she'd got until the time I returned to make the decision, as I refused to be spoken to and treated like I was that night. Add in the fact that she didn't see, and I'm still not sure she does, that her reaction was uncalled for and way over the top. Before she could respond, I told her in no uncertain terms that if she started screaming at me that the second option would be immediately removed from the equation. I'd also reiterated that if I found out she was seeing someone else whilst I was away, option 1 would be selected by default. Comments. While that's a lot, I hope you enjoy your trip and let's see what she'll pick. If she picks the second option, I like to believe that there's still love in your marriage and it might just turn out fine. Good luck. Update 2. Well, just thought I'd provide a quick update. I'm finally back home after having a great time catching up with friends in the US. I turned my phone on after I landed back in the UK, and holy hell, I thought it was going to blow up. Messages, voicemails, emails and missed calls, mostly from my wife and a few from friends and family. It turns out the friends we were with at that fateful weekend had informed my parents of what went on, along with a few other mutual friends that had inquired about my well-being since I'd been pretty much radio silent since I left for my trip. The messages from my wife started with the usual empty platitudes, insincere apologies, etc. I assume when I didn't give her the satisfaction of responding, the messages became more menacing and darker in nature, almost to the point of threatening. I rang her and told her that I'd landed back in the UK and I'd be home after I made a quick stop off at my mother's house. She seemed overly affectionate and sweet on the phone, almost had me wondering if it was the same person I left when I headed out to the US. So I spoke to my mom, laid out everything that had happened and why I took the trip abroad, and she said that she understood, but was considerably upset that I left without telling her in person. I had rang and left a voicemail message for her, unaware that she didn't know how to access it. Mom's really not tech savvy BTW. Anyhow, I get home and my wife practically rugby tackles me the second I'm through the door, again showering me with affection as if nothing had happened at all. I explained that I'm tired from the flight ECT and all I really want at that moment in time is a long hot shower and some sleep. I walk upstairs and place my suitcase in the spare room just because it was the closer room as I walked up the stairs before getting in the shower. My wife doesn't say anything, although I heard her creep up THR stairs and mooch around the landing, even trying the bathroom door. Finding it locked behind me, she left and went back downstairs. After showering, I collapsed on the bed in the spare room and fell asleep for several hours. After waking up, I went downstairs and sat opposite my wife, who promptly got up, smiled, and came and sat on my lap again, being overly affectionate. She made small talk, asking if I'd enjoyed my trip, asking where I'd been and what I'd saw. I raised her off my lap and sat her down on the sofa next to me, and asked her bluntly if she'd made a decision about the 2 envelopes if presented her before I left. She simply scoffed at me and asked if it was really serious, because she assumed that I was just being childish and throwing a tantrum. I informed her that I was deadly serious about it, and if she'd given it any thought. She just smirked at me and told me to stop being stupid and get over it. My reply was she'd given me her answer and thanks for letting me know where I stand. At which point I rang the solicitor who drew up the 2 sets of papers. She's an old school friend, by the way, and although I hated ringing her one Friday afternoon whilst she was likely with family, she asked me what choice my wife had made. I informed her that I didn't want to discuss it over the phone and could make an appointment next week to discuss it in person and go over my options. She must have anticipated my call because she said she'd penciled me in for a possible meeting Monday afternoon. As I wrote down the appointment time, I caught my wife staring daggers at me and looking so residential in the face I thought she might be on the verge of either having a stroke, heart attack, or both. After I'd finished the call, I turned to face her, and before she had time to say anything, I told her she'd made her choice, and that I was serious about it. Later I heard on the phone sobbing to her best friend about the situation, asking for help on how she could fix the situation. I couldn't hear the other half of the conversation, but from the sobs my wife was making I can only assume that the advice wasn't what she wanted to hear. So at the moment whilst writing this out, I'm also going through multiple hours of camera footage from the home security system I had installed before I left. Just in case she decided to have some male company over in my absence, if you get my drift. Because as others have replied and suggested, she may have been involved with someone else, and either way I wanted proof. So that's pretty much where I am at the moment. Oh, and my staffy won't leave me alone. He keeps looking at me, nuzzling me, trying to sit on my lap, wanting to be fussed. Just asked him if he wanted to go for a walk, and he looks like he's about to burst with excitement.